The tourism industry is one that is complex, Murphy and Murphy 2004, with various systems and components, Leaper 1979, 1990, and Smith 1988, that need to be understood in order for businesses within the industry to fully understand their customers to be successful. Furthermore, the tourism industry is identified as an area of constant change, Zane, Madsen, and Jensen Butler 2007, which needs to be taken into consideration in striving towards successful tourism. Conjointly, the importance of local communities as hosts, employees, and business owners has been emphasised of late due to the ramifications of poor host-guest relationships beat in 2006. Additionally, the overriding significance of rural tourism in aiding businesses involved in the industry should be understood, such as accommodation providers, Wilson, Fresemeyer and Van Ness, 2001, Evans and Chon, 1989. Moreover, it is beneficial to incorporate local residents within the tourism industry as well, to not only improve the authenticity and tourist experience visitors to destinations seek, Butler 1974, Murphy and Murphy 2004, Sort and Leeson 1999, but to also improve and manage the local community's perceptions and change in behaviour towards a destination in order to make it more successful. Abercrombie 1993, Doxy 1975, Beaton 2006, Murphy and Murphy 2004. In this conceptual context, the presentation explores the touristic experience, recognition and comprehension of tourism development and destinations, as well as these destination responses to tourism. To best answer these three concepts and to provide the audience of the Basque Shire with the knowledge to better understand the tourist, target market and destination, the presentation will initially start off with a brief overview of the touristic experience components, and as a whole. Secondly, the motivations of the tourist visiting the destination of the Basque Shire will be evaluated in conjunction with tourist typologies. Thirdly, tourism changes on the macro level will be explained in the context of the Basque Shire. Fourthly, in line with transformations in the destination, influencer and consequences of destination change will then be explored. Finally, the presentation will conclude with key recommendations in future course for the accommodation providers within the tourism industry in the Basque Shire, in addition to a concise conclusion summing up the key points discussed throughout the presentation. Hi, as accommodation providers within the Basque Shire, it is vital to comprehend the concepts involved within your industry tourism. It is essential that you understand your customers, the tourists. To start, Siobhan will explain to you in detail about the tourist experience.
A tourist experience of a place can be moulded by multiple aspects, such as their knowledge of place, motives, travel companions, images induced in regards to that place, or activities and the visitor's individual personalities. Ryan 2010. And it is these individual stories or recollections of a place that create how much value a tourist attaches to that destination. A bad review of a destination place can have negative impacts on that destination's ability to draw visitors. Thus, it is vital that you, as accommodation providers, place importance on providing the best experience possible. The Canadian Tourism Commission 2007 reasserts this importance by urging tourism providers that tourism is all about the experience. Ritchie and Hudson 2009 contend that for a tourist to achieve an optimal experience, they must have been provided with a sense of exhilaration and enjoyment that is long cherished, and an experience that becomes a landmark in memory for what life should be like. Cohen 1979 proposes a phenomenological typology of tourist experiences. He identifies these types as being either the recreational mode, the diversionary mode, the experiential mode, the experimental mode, and the existential mode. Unger and Kernan 1983 also attempt to define components of leisure and tourism experiences by identifying 5 major subjective components of intrinsic satisfaction in leisure, these being perceived freedom, involvement, arousal, mastery, and spontaneity. Understanding the profile of tourists in these typologies will allow accommodation providers to cater their services to build a greater and more controlled experience for their customers. Aho 2001 highlights this useful strategy in his work, suggesting that there are a number of processes that can be purposely used to produce intended experiences by means of moving people between places. It must be considered that the limitation to grouping tourists by typologies is that every individual has a different impact upon their own experience. However, having a rough character profile of your accommodation visitors will allow you to target your services to create the experience you want to provide your guests. I will now pass to James, who will explore the motivations of tourists.
Motivation is a vital aspect of tourism, since 2000, and can be considered a trigger for travel behaviour and a determining factor for different aspects of tourist activity in terms of the reasoning for travel, the specific destination choice, and the overall trip satisfaction. Divisa Laguna and Palacios, 2010. In this way, it is vital that you as accommodation providers within the Basque Coast Shire understand travel motivators for tourists, your customers, to gain better knowledge of and leverage why they are travelling and where to and how to best satisfy them to have a successful business within the industry. At the basic level, Dan 1977 explains that there are two key factors in why a tourist decides to travel, either due to the push or pull method, where pull are external factors attracting the tourist to the destination, and push methods comprising of internal forces contributing to the decision to travel. This theory then intertwines with the literature of LIPA 1970, where the push factors involve factors from the generating region forcing them to the destination region, and also the pull factors of the destination region enticing tourists from their generating region, all the while both doing so through the transit region. Furthermore, this entwines with the model constructed by Frigid 1984, which explains that motivations and decisions to travel occur in the anticipation stage, then the tourist travels or transit region on site, or the destination region, and experiences occur. These are then taken back to the anticipation or destination region and can be utilised in future travel. These motivations and decisions are also based upon tourist typologies, discussed within the next section. It is vital for you as accommodation providers to understand this process and also the motivating factors for tourists in order to leverage them. This can be explained by the core motives within Pearce 2005, which involve novelty, escape, or relaxation, and the relationship building, and the more complex within the literature of Crompton 1979, where there are two categories of motivation, being psychosocial and cultural. These include, but are not limited to, a mundane environment, a push factor, and prestige, a pull factor. And for culture, this includes novelty and culture itself. These factors need to be acknowledged and understood and leveraged within your businesses to create a successful tourism industry within the Basque Coast Shire.
Tourism typologies play a major role in determining what types of tourists will visit a destination. This is important for accommodation providers of the Basque Coast region to be aware of, as PLOG 2001 asserted that destinations appeal to specific types of people and usually follow a rather predictable pattern of popularity growth and decline over time. Whilst there are many different approaches to defining tourist typologies, PLOG 2001 proposed that tourists can be categorized based on psychographic personality types. They exist on a scale from dependables to venturers. The dependables are the tourists that are generally anxious in terms of safety and finance, thus try to make their lives predictable with as minimal risk as possible. Whereas venturers have low levels of personal anxiety, are self-confident and intellectually exploring. This is important to note for accommodation providers to leverage by making the dependables feel comfortable enough to attract them to their destination, but still be exciting enough to also attract the venturers. If the tourists are too dependable, then there will be a lack of tourists visiting the destination as they are too worried to go. And if they are too venturous, then they might decide to go out and explore other destinations, and therefore the destination's popularity will decline. Ultimately, accommodation providers in Basque Coast region should aim to attract a balance of both, as most tourists can be found in the middle-centric area of the scale. PLOG 2001. Furthermore, PLOG's 2001 theory also links back to Frigden's 1984 recreation travel framework as discussed in the previous section, with 5 phases including 1. Anticipation, 2. Travel to the destination, 3. On-site behaviour, 4. Return travel, and 5. Recollection. The tourist's actions in each of these phases will vary depending on their tourist personality. For example, if they are extremely dependable, they may struggle to plan their trip to the destination as their anticipation phase causes them too much anxiety. Therefore, it is important for accommodation providers of Basque Coast region to note how tourist personalities can affect their destination selection, the activities they decide to undertake whilst in the destination, and their overall experience of the destination. It is clear that there is a relationship between travel personalities and destination selection. PLOG 2001. By understanding the link between tourist typologies and the phases of the recreation travel framework, accommodation providers in the Basque Coast region should aim to formulate strategies that appeals to the different tourist typologies in order to optimize their attraction of appropriate tourists to the destination, whilst also creating an enjoyable experience throughout the whole tourism journey. Tourism has evolved and grown as an industry over time. Cooper and Hall, 2008. Thus, it is important for accommodation providers in the Basque Coast region to understand how it has affected their destination over time in order to help them continue to respond effectively to change in the future. Hall 2007 uses a framework to analyse the macro environment in which can impact a destination. These consist of major forces including sociocultural, technological, environmental, economic, and political and ethical forces. However, the main forces that are currently affecting the Basque Coast region in specific are the economic, sociocultural, technological, and environmental factors. In terms of economic forces, the Australian exchange rate is lower compared to a few countries at the moment, such as the United States and Europe. Herald Sun 2016. Therefore, there is potential for Australians to be holidaying locally in Basque Coast to enjoy a more financially efficient vacation. To increase the likeliness of local tourists staying overnight in the destination, accommodation providers could offer discounted promotional deals to attract more tourists. With sociocultural forces, the Basque Coast region is becoming increasingly popular for Asian tourists, thus language barriers may become an issue. Tourism Victoria 2012. Thus, it is important for accommodation providers to expand their services to minimise these barriers. In terms of technological forces, Basque Coast Shire 2016 are continually developing their roads to make it more effective and efficient to travel to the region, through building and maintenance of roads, bridges, and footpaths. This will increase the accessibility of the destination for current and future generations to come. Thus, accommodation providers should anticipate increased amounts of tourists over the coming years and ensure that they have enough accommodation to provide to the tourists that the increased accessibility will bring. In relation to environmental forces, climate change is an issue for the Basque Coast Shire as a result of greenhouse gases created by human activities, which will impact the quality of air, damage local flora and fauna for current and future generations as it continues to increase. Basque Coast 2016. Thus, accommodation providers in the region should strive to be more environmentally friendly by ensuring that their carbon emissions are as minimal as possible. So to limit environmental damage and pollution, and therefore increase tourist appeal to the destination.
As with any location, the Basque Coast region will be susceptible to change. Changes in a tourist destination will consequently lead to changes in destination response by the local community. The causes of these changes are important to both acknowledge and understand when determining the consequences of these changes and the ways in which they can be dealt with. The changes can be expressed through a comparison of Butler 1980 and Plog 2001 explanations of destination cycles of change. Butler 1980's cycle follows an almost bell curve which passes through a series of phases, being exploration, involvement, development, consolidation, stagnation, rejuvenation, and declination. When aligned against Plog's 2001 psychographic tourist typology bell curve, we can see how different types of tourists and the amounts of tourists for each type will visit the destination. These altered types and rates coincide with the various stages of the destination cycle. From these changes, the following problems can occur. These are factors that can be sorted into three key areas, being socio-cultural, environmental, and economical. In the case of the Basque Coast region, some of the main change contributors are as follows. And you can see here in the socio-cultural area, we've got things like visitor changes. In the environmental, we have things like overcrowding and littering, which can eventually lead to flora and fauna being unable to survive. And we also have in the economical price inflation and shortage of goods, among other things. With the additional understanding of Dockley 1975's Iridex, we can see how communities will shift through the various stages as tourism development and tourist numbers increase or decrease in the local area. If destination is left to change to the critical point or beyond, there are some unnerving consequences that will likely follow. Two of these issues may be things such as annoyance and irritation for the local community, as well as destruction of local land and habitats of native wildlife. However, the third and potentially most important for the local community, though more specifically the Basque Coast accommodation providers such as yourselves, would be the breakdown of a tourist location. Due to too little tourists, organisations along the Basque Coast would be subject to a large amount of job, income and other losses. The Basque Coast organisations and community would be faced with detriment and struggle to support themselves due to the lack of incoming funds, as so many organisations rely on the tourism industry. So for the most part, when dealing with these consequences, it is crucial that the Basque Coast community ensure effective planning is enforced to create a balance between supporting tourist numbers and yet prevent them from breaching critical capacity. I'll now pass it on to Siobhan, who will do a summary of our recommendations. Thank you.
According to the Basque Coast Shire Council 2016, Phillip Island, a popular tourist destination within the Shire, attracts over 1.85 million visitors every year, generating approximately $369 million in visitor direct expenditure. It has been predicted that visitor numbers to the region are forecast to double, reaching an estimated 3 million visitors, increasing expenditure into the local economy and our Shire. As it stands at the moment, 92% of international visitors are only day trippers, and others are staying in accommodation outside of Basque Coast Shire. The Shire would benefit enormously from persuading day trippers into staying overnight or for even longer periods. Thus, we suggest the following recommendations for accommodation providers in the Basque Coast Shire for the benefits of your own businesses. Firstly, to undergo extensive research of your typical guests. Data collection surrounding your visitors can serve as a useful tool to working out the demographics and motivations of your consumers. Understanding the motivations behind why tourists travel, whether they be for leisure or cultural, etc. purposes, can allow you as a business to tailor your service to meet these expectations and desired experiences. It will also identify a potential missing visitor profile, to which strategies can be put in place to establish why visitor numbers are low in that tourist typology. For example, it may be found that your hotel has a low amount of international visitors staying yearly. This could be because your business has a low online presence, and potential customers don't even have the opportunity to consider staying at your accommodation. Feedback surveys given to guests during and after their stay with you is a method you can employ to collate this information. It will give your business great leverage in being able to determine what the customer wants and being able to satisfy their demands, so that they have an optimal experience in visiting Basque Coast Shire. Secondly, due to this expected increase in visitors to our Shire, accommodation providers need to consider investment in infrastructure development to meet the demands of visitor numbers during peak times, and to reposition their business in the eyes of new markets, both domestic and international. Development will also make the experience of visiting appear more enticing. It is additionally important that a suitable level of infrastructure is developed to manage future growth sustainably. Thirdly, expand your product offering. In order for visitors to see value in staying for a longer period of time, and therefore needing accommodation to stay at, we recommend that accommodation providers begin to explore working with other tourist service providers to create experience and activities packages. For example, you may create a hospitality package with a nearby restaurant, and thereby be able to offer guests a restaurant dinner as included in costs of staying overnight. Similarly, there exists the opportunity to team up with Phillip Island Nature Parks, who offer a range of tourist experiences, such as the Penguin Parade, Koala Conservation Centre and Churchill Island, where guests could be offered a discounted rate to these attractions if they stay. Accommodation providers could even work with other accommodation providers within the Shire and combine a week-long Bass Shire adventure package. For example, visitors could purchase packages to stay in Inverloch, Cape Patterson, Wonthaggi and Phillip Island, giving them a true Basque Coast Shire experience.
In conclusion, tourism is complex in nature and needs to be fully understood by you as accommodation providers within the Basque Coast Shire in order to be successful within the local tourism industry. Firstly, knowledge of the tourist experience needs to be gained in order to gather information of experiences and values tourists have to a specific destination. Secondly, it is vital to come to terms with the different forms of motivations that tourists may have for travel and the different types of tourists they may be. These impacts can then be managed if understood using specific strategies and tools that you develop as tourism as a whole is dependent upon the situation within the Basque Coast Shire's boundaries, limits and capabilities. Furthermore, there will be changes on the macro level in terms of tourism in the Bass Coast Shire, as well as destination changes which are influenced by a variety of factors and have some serious consequences, with balance being the key. Lastly, it is recommended for you that within your operations of providing accommodation to the Shire, you undergo extensive research to determine visitor profiles, develop infrastructure, and expand your product offerings. Thank you for listening.